could have given up, but you didn't. You could have stopped believing, but you didn't. You could have kept living their expectations, but you decided to make this life your own. And in turn, you're here. Hello, everyone. Today we're meeting Lisa Sugarman. She is an advocate for mental health, an author, a writer, a podcast host. Thank you, Lisa, for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Anna.
Thank you. So let's start our conversation by diving into your journey of becoming the person you are today. What led you to discover your true passion in life? How did it start for you?
Well, I think the true passion has many parts, has many levels. So my ultimate passion, I suppose, is to be of service to other people, and it's taken me a very, very long time to arrive in a place of knowing that that's my passion. And for the longest time, I've been a content creator. You mentioned that I was a writer, which I am. I've written a bunch of parenting books. I was in the parenting space for a very, very long time. And I've done a lot of different types of content creation in the form of books and a column that I've written for a long time, and on the radio, a radio show here in Boston for years. And it all centers around the idea of taking my experiences and in some cases, most recently, my own pain in life through discovery of certain things that certain aspects of my life that we can talk about in more detail, having to do with my dad and his suicide, but taking that pain and turning that into purpose and becoming a mental health advocate and changing the direction of the content that I was creating to focus very, very heavily on the people who are experiencing mental health issues and are in crisis, and people who need resources. So that's kind of how I arrived in this place, and how I do what I do and why I do what I do.
Yes, and you just mentioned there were some aspects in your life that led you to understanding that this is your calling. This is
Mhm.
something that you're, I would say, destined to do. But a lot of times we don't know what is it. But during the different experiences in our life, sometimes it's painful and stressful, and some kind of trauma that we experience. We kind
Mhm.
of look at it as something that's been brought into light for purpose, and
Mhm.
purpose is bigger than ourselves. And if you can just touch upon what was that purpose for you and how did you discover it?
So I've always tried to somehow inspire the people that I create content for in whatever space that I'm creating that content. If it's for parents, I'm inspiring them to kind of embrace their imperfections and give themselves grace. If it's in the mental health space, it's inspiring people to share their experiences and their stories because of all the strength and the healing power that's found in those stories. And for me, what kind of shifted gears for me was the discovery that my father, who died when I was 10 years old, very, very suddenly, of what I was told was a heart attack,
Mhm.
discovered 35 years later that it was not a heart attack and that my dad had actually died by suicide. And it just completely gutted me. It turned my world kind of inside out, and it put me on a totally different path to regrieve my dad's death and that loss all over again. And it really just brought mental illness and depression and anxiety and mental health and well-being onto my radar in a very personal way. And it made me really want to understand what people need and what people are going through when they're in that desperate headspace. And so after I kind of went through my own grieving process and my own just acceptance of what the real story was versus the original story, I just I knew that I needed to do something with this with this knowledge, with this experience, and share it for the benefit of whomever might be going through something similar. And so that's what I started doing. And little by little, I started sharing my story. And it was like once I started sharing it, even just talking about it on the radio or writing about it, blogging about it, writing columns about it. The more I did it, the more I wanted to do it, and the more conversations I had, the more obvious it became to me that people needed to talk about these things that have been so stigmatized and so kept secret for so long. And that's really what motivated me to want to kind of start my own personal campaign of storytelling and sharing for the benefit of anyone that that story might reach.
Yes, and I think a lot of people who going through those stressful, unpleasant emotions, like you mentioned, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts,
Mm,
they just find themselves feeling alone, like nobody would understand what they're going through.
yeah.
But once they start hearing the stories of others, they understand that they're not alone. A lot of people going through the same thing, and
Mm,
there is a way out. There is a light in the end of the tunnel. So
mhm.
it brings them hope. It brings them that message that they needed to hear. And I feel like storytelling has so much power in it. And if we were more open in sharing our stories, it would be, we would bring to healing a lot of different aspects that we were avoiding or hiding in our life.
Mm.
And um, if you can just touch upon how can like the storytelling, you know, the aspect of your business right now that you are focusing on is helping other people, and how you are kind of applying it towards the healing process, and what kind of like feedback you hearing in terms of how it helped other people, so we all know the importance of it.
That's a great question. And I'm fortunate that I've been doing this now long enough that I have gotten an awful lot of feedback from lots of different spaces, lots of different organizations, lots of different people in my own immediate circle of influence, and then people outside of that. So I have a neat range of feedback to draw on, and overwhelmingly, people just really feel validated when they're allowed to share their experience, when they're allowed to share their grief or their loss or their anger or their sadness or confusion over either a loss, a traumatic loss like the one that I had, or maybe it's over a mental health condition that they're dealing with or that someone close to them is dealing with. Those are stressful positions to be in. And you made a really good point when you said that it's incredibly isolating. We get caught in our own head and we write our own narratives, and we just instinctively assume that nobody's going through exactly what I'm going through. So nobody's really going to understand until you reach out and you connect with a community in that space who's dealing with something similar, like a loss of a friend or a family member, an illness of a friend or a family member or of yourself is always going to have little nuances that are very different and specific to that person or that situation. So no two losses or no two mental illnesses are the same, but there are all these commonalities. And those are the things that I've found that people are enjoying that community, even though it might be a hard community to be a part of. Like nobody wants to be part of a grief club.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to be part of uh, a mental health support group because they, of course, would not like to have to be dealing with the mental illness that they may be dealing with. But so nobody wants to have to deal with those things. But once you realize that A, there are so many other people out there who are dealing with it, and B, there is no shame in dealing with it, in talking about it, in seeking help for it, that's powerful. I think that's the change agent, honestly. in terms of so much of our mental health and mental well-being is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and open up. Once we do that, it's not as scary. In reality, it's scary in our head, but it's not as scary in reality when we just open up and share what we're going through, because there's always someone who can connect back with that.
Yes, and also I think a lot of times we are looking at processing our emotions or talking about it as sign of weakness. And again, it's been maybe like a social conditioning or the way we heard messages from the people that raised us or any like cultural beliefs. But in reality, once, like you said, you start opening up and connecting with others through the power of vulnerability, when you just let yourself be seen and heard, this is where you find the healing process start for you. And easier it gets each time you do it. And you feel lighter, you feel free of, really like releasing that type emotional stress that you've been carrying for so long. And again, once we realize it's only us who keeping ourselves in that place, that's where we start taking that responsibility for our own mental health and wellness, and giving ourselves time to process emotion, to connect with the community, and really prioritizing our health in that regard. And I think it's the foundation for the more happier and joyful life to become, and again, it starts with us, with our inner work and with our willingness to share our message with others. And we don't know how powerful it could be. It could change somebody's life, really.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed as I've become part of all of these different mental health communities that are out there. And there are so many of them. I mean, being a survivor of suicide loss is a very distinct group to be in. It's a very specific, unusual, unique kind of loss. Grieving someone who has died of natural causes, or who had cancer, or who, God forbid, died of an accident. I mean, those are all obviously terrible, significant losses, impactful losses. The grief is just somehow different. So there's different relatability. But when you put yourself in a position of being surrounded by people who are holding space for you and who are not judging you and who are allowing you to be at whatever point on that cycle of grief, because grief is very cyclical. You could be here, then you could be here, then you could be down here. And it's, it's kind of like that spiral staircase. You're just always kind of forever going up and down it. But when you have that community and you feel supported by that community, that's priceless. Like that's a game changer in terms of resources and in terms of stability, because you have a base, you have people to lean on and to lean into. And I just can't speak enough about the power of community and how healing it can be.
Right. And we just need to know that there are a lot of resources out there. If only we could reach out for help, because in that space, like we're isolating ourselves and really like believing our story that we're telling on the repeat, that we're the only one going through this, and we're feeling very sad and stressful, then we just don't see the possibilities. We just only like kind of like focused on how we feel, and we don't see the other ways out of it. So what would you I would say maybe some kind of like, I don't know, resources that you can provide for people who maybe going through those challenges time right now and they don't know where to reach out. Is there some kind of like organizations that could help them, or maybe something that you would provide that they know they always it's always available. No
Mhm.
matter what they're going through, they can always ask for help.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I think that's fundamentally at the core of how we navigate whatever condition or situation or illness that we're dealing with. We need to find support, and like you said, it is out there. One of the things that I've done in the last year is to become a crisis counselor for an organization called the Trevor Project, and that's crisis support and suicide prevention hotline specifically designated for LGBTQ youth in crisis. There are also so many other organizations like Samaritans, like the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, like the National Alliance on Mental Illness. There are so many of these numbers, the 988 Lifeline, that are available, that are there. And while there are definitely organizations and helplines that are very specific in their niche, there are others, like for instance the 988 crisis lifeline, which used to be the old 800 number that you would call and get a lifeline counselor. That's a great place to start for anyone. This new shorter access number of 988 has been around only for a little over a year, and there's a really big push in the mental health industry right now to really get people to know and recognize and source that number in the same way that somebody would pick up the phone during an emergency and call 911. That's exactly what this new system is designed to be. It's that emergency resource, free, accessible to anyone, 24 hours a day, for support and for resources, additional resources. So that's the number one resource that I would suggest. I mean, there are also so many other different local organizations. All of the organizations who I mentioned, or most of them, have their national chapters, but they also have very they've got a wide variety of local chapters around the country as well. So a lot of these organizations are doing in-person meetings, they're doing in-person support groups, whether it's a support group for someone who's struggling with mental illness, or whether it's a grief group. Those are other options. There are obviously online options as well. Tons and tons of virtual support groups for all different types of situations are out there as well. And I think it's just a matter of looking for them and exploring them and seeing what fits. There's counseling. If you're fortunate enough to have insurance that allows you to support that kind of therapy, that's also an option that I highly recommend. I can't speak enough to the value and the benefit of therapy, just being able to sit with someone who is unbiased, who's not connected to you or your struggles or your issues, and just being able to get that kind of unbiased feedback. So one of the things that I recently did was to kind of re-architect my whole website to be a destination for people to find resources and content and supporting materials to help them navigate, in particular, suicide awareness and prevention, but mental health as a whole. So one of the things that I've done recently is to create, I think it's a pretty comprehensive list. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from other professionals in the industry who have said that I've kind of, I guess, managed to include all of the major organizations who might be out there providing help. So that's, that for anybody who might be listening to this, who might kind of need a place to go, to just a starting point, go to my website and take a peek at my resources page. There are direct links to all of the organizations that I already mentioned, and then so many more that may be of help as
Yes,
well.
I'm gonna also include your website in the show notes for those who are interested to look into that in more detail. But also, I wanna talk about your experience with loss of your
Mhm.
father and the grief that you went through.
Mhm.
You just found it later in life, and it's kind of like brought up some emotions that you needed to deal with.
Mm.
What helped you to go through those emotions? What kind of maybe tools or practices that you used in order to overcome and really like find yourself on the other side and become stronger because of that experience?
So I've always been a writer, and I write obviously professionally, but I've always journaled my entire life since I was a little girl. I've got a million full journals from back to when I was, 5, 6 years old. That's always been an incredible outlet for me as a part of my own daily practice. I try to journal at least every day, and just kind of, we all have so much stuff in our heads, and we can only support so much at one time before some of it has to start to come out in certain ways. So I have found for me that journaling daily, and it doesn't have to be pages and pages. It can be a single thought, it can be an idea, it can be a feeling, it can be short, it can be long. So I do an awful lot of that regularly. I also have a strong meditation practice. I meditate very faithfully every morning, just as a way of kind of looking inward, setting intentions every day, understanding how my body's feeling, how my mind is feeling, what I want to give to the world on that particular day, how I want to show up. So I lean very heavily into that. And as I said, I went back into therapy probably a little over a year ago, I would say. I'd been seeing a psychologist when I was probably in my 20s, when I had taken a gap year from school and didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. And I started seeing a therapist to see if I could kind of figure out my own path. So it had nothing to do with any of the issues that I'm in therapy for now, which have a lot to do with just obviously, my father's death and his suicide, and reprocessing all of that and unpacking all of that. So I've leaned very, very heavily into that. In fact, I just came home 10 minutes before you and I went on. I just came home from therapy this week, and that's been incredibly helpful to me, just to have that other person there, that non-judgmental person who has incredible insights and wisdom and resources that maybe your family or friends don't have, and because that's not their wheelhouse. So I lean into that. And then I'm very fortunate. I have an incredible family support system, incredible support system of friends in my life that I also lean into. And I recommend anybody do that. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to build each other up. We're here to bring out the best in each other. We're here to support each other when we can't really support ourselves. And it's a scary thing, asking for help. I'm not somebody who loves to ask for help, but I'm always there to want to offer it. It's a hard place. That's another kind of vulnerability. And once you get over that and you get to that point where you feel like you can open up and truly express how you feel, it really, in my case anyway, has made such a profound difference in the way that I can process what I have in my mind to process. So those are the ways. Those are the ways that I personally navigate my own mental well-being.
Yes, and I think a lot of people will find it beneficial, especially when we become mindful. If there are any practices that will bring us that awareness of what is it that we're thinking on the
Mhm.
repeat, that really like in our subconscious, and that's what causing us to make certain decisions in life and the way that we are feeling, right? So we need to see the connection between what kind of thoughts are coming up for us and
Mm.
become aware of why we keep thinking it. Is it something that, maybe it was some belief that I acquired along the way, or it was some kind of conditioning that I've been through, and maybe find a way to release or let go of something that's no longer serving you. But
Mm.
in order for you to really like see it, you have to become aware or become mindful. And I think journaling and meditation, it's very good practice to start with with looking into your own self and give yourself time to process and unpack and
Mm-hmm.
reflect on what is it that's going on that I'm not aware of. And it's really is the foundation of how am I feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people would find it beneficial, especially if we integrate in our, daily life and doing it consistently. And the more we do it, the better we kind of like become at it, and we see
Mm-hmm.
the result of processing those emotions. Because a lot of times, I think, well, people get in they kind of avoid feeling, right? They
Mm-hmm.
into different type of either distractions or addictions, and there are plenty of them nowadays they can look into, but that's their way of numbing themselves or avoiding
Mm-hmm.
certain feeling. So for us to really like normalize that way of processing emotional or speaking up, this is how we are starting the healing process, and
Mm-hmm.
really like um, not judging other people that going through the same thing or something that maybe we didn't experience, but again holding that safe space for them and just listen. Sometimes it takes you to just listen to another person without saying a word for them
Mm-hmm.
to just open up and start feeling better,
Yeah.
don't you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's interesting too, because the truth of it is all it takes is one person to hold space for you, to listen to you, to give you that safe environment to be vulnerable and open. And that can change the course of someone's life. That can change the course of, for instance, someone being in a really dark mental space, wanting to potentially harm themselves or end their life. And having one person listen to you and validate you and see you and hear you can change your trajectory completely. Sometimes that can be the difference between someone being okay and being not okay. So I am just such a big believer in adding those kinds of self-care practices into our overall life practice. And it's like anything, it takes a little work in the beginning. If it's not something you do that often, it's going to seem awkward. It may seem intimidating or scary. But once you do the thing, that's the essence of anything. We build it up in our heads to be something that we're not going to like, or we won't succeed, or it's not going to help us. But once we do the thing and we get to actually see what it is and see how it impacts us and see how it makes us feel, there's often a completely different outcome,
Mhm.
because it's almost never what we expect it to be.
Yes, and we just need to really like start doing something that maybe, like you said, it's unfamiliar, uncomfortable, but then we will see the results for ourselves, and it will really like uh would empower us into making
Mm-hmm.
more time for that self-care and self-love, because that's what is the most important part for us to feel that we are worthy, right? Don't
Yes.
need to prove our worthiness to anyone. It's just enough for us to acknowledge it with ourselves and knowing that we have something that we are unique at, something that we can share with the world. There is a purpose for us being here. So
Mm.
just acknowledging that and knowing that we're worthy, and really like prioritizing our mental and physical health enough to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
From that place we can flourish, we can see ourselves
Absolutely.
becoming a different person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, we can. And it's funny because we we don't put mental health and well-being in the same categories that we put other kinds of self-care, right? We make the time, and I'm speaking as women because women are more apt to get their hair done regularly, get their nails done regularly, go to the yoga class regularly, see the chiropractor regularly. But obviously, men and women alike do all those things. But we prioritize all of those things. You go to the doctor for your regular visit, you go to your dentist for the regular visit, you get your eyes checked, you do all of these things. We go to the gym, and yet we're not paying the same kind of attention to our mental health and well-being. And it works the same way. Like, building that emotional mental infrastructure is no different than building our like physical muscles. You go to the gym, you do one workout, you're not all of a sudden going to be ripped and toned and healthy. It's a process, and it's a process that you almost can't detect day by day by day. But when you start here, and then you consistently do that process, and you get to this point where you can turn and look back over that process, then all of a sudden you see the definition, and you see the strength, and you feel the changes. Well, it works the same way with our mental health. We stay true to that practice. We stay true to those daily habits that fill us up. We're so worried about filling everybody else up that we don't pay enough attention to kind of our own tank and what we all need as individuals. And once we start doing that, it empowers us. That's the fuel. There are so many different kinds of fuel, though, that we all need, and that mental strength is a big part of it.
Yes, definitely. I think first, if we fill our own cup, then we'll have enough to share with others. So
Exactly.
not being selfish to provide that self-care for yourself, it's pretty much essential for
Mm-hmm.
well-being. And we should do it on a regular basis. And the more we do it, we see the ripple effect. So it's not just about us. And then we'll see how we interact with other people and how we bring that in our relationship. From
Mm-hmm.
that place, it's just a different life that we can build.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just need to really make it a priority, and not just talking about, but taking an action, really
Mm-hmm.
like putting in your schedule as something
Mm-hmm.
that is important. So this is how you show yourself that you are important, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna show up for you, because you should be your own advocate.
We have to be. We absolutely have to be. And you're so right in terms of prioritizing our own self-care and health and well-being. I do that. My calendar, I mean, everybody has their calendar in their phone nowadays, but if you look at my calendar, every single day at 5 a.m., 7 days a week, and obviously life happens, and sometimes you can't do the workout, or you can't take the run or go to the gym, but every single day there is an appointment that I schedule with myself in my calendar that says I meditate, followed by yoga, followed by journaling. I try to, read a few pages every night, even if I'm only reading 15 or 30 minutes a night, just to kind of pull myself away from my screens, to give myself a little downtime, to give myself a little infusion of somebody else's wisdom, whatever it is. And once you do those things on a regular basis, and you feel the impact, because even things that are designed to help us emotionally are impacting our bodies, our physical well-being. Like, we carry a lot of stuff around. You can have a sore neck, you can have a headache, you can have a sore back, you can feel tight and stressed, and that manifests in our physical body what's going on in our head. So when we get the head part right, a lot of other stuff just falls in line.
Yes, and it's just become natural then to see it reflected in the
Mm-hmm.
physical manifestation of it, I would say. So I think this is something we just need to keep in mind as
Mm-hmm.
a priority, and really schedule this time with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
every single day, even, okay, 5 times a week, or very often. So it has to be a regular practice, and we have to
Mm-hmm.
commit into that process and be responsible for it. So
Mm-hmm.
this is our life, and we are the one creating our life on purpose. So
Mm-hmm.
once we realize that, I think it was just we become a better version of who we can be.
Mm-hmm. And then
And
how we show up in the world is so different. We show up in the world as a grounded human being. We may have more energy, we may have more capacity. If we're not struggling internally, then we have way more capacity to show up for the people who we need to show up for. And that matters. And that becomes addictive, to be honest with you. Once you see the benefits of that and you start holding yourself accountable, like no one's going to hold us accountable for doing the things that we all need to do as human beings to lead healthy, energetic lives. Nobody but us. And once we start prioritizing ourselves in that way, I think the possibilities are limitless. I really do.
yes, definitely. So glad we had this conversation today. And for those who would like to find you online, how can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me. The easiest place is to find me on my website, and
Mhm.
that's lisasugarman.com. That has all the resources that we talked about earlier, mental health resources, how to get in touch with a lot of these organizations that I think people need to start reaching out to. I have a lot of content on there, interviews like the one that we're doing now, different perspectives from different mental health professionals that might be useful to people. And I also just recently launched a YouTube channel, and on that channel, I have a Suicide Survivor Series video series, a very, very short, like 90 seconds from kind of the heart and mind of a survivor, observations, feelings that I've had, experiences that I've had, knowledge that I've acquired. And I'm just kind of putting those out into the world as connecting points to help people find their community. So you can find that there as well. And then I'm on all the other socials, like Instagram is Lisa_Sugarman, Facebook is the Lisa Sugarman, TikTok is the Lisa Sugarman. So I'm kind of all over, all over the place.
Thank you. And as we close today, what would be the thought for our listeners?
I would say take the time to invest in yourself in the way that you take the time to invest in everybody else around you. Because if your cup is empty, you have nothing to offer anybody else around you. But when your cup is full, you can go anywhere, you can do anything, and you have the capacity to be what you truly want to be.
Yes, thank you. And I hope you enjoy your day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me, Anna. I really appreciate the time.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, hit the subscribe button and share it with others. Stay tuned.